At dawn on a winter morning in 1891, an entire American town stood in silence. Hands raised, mouths moving in unison, swearing to forget their own children. By nightfall, the town no longer existed. No smoke, no bodies, no graves. Only a ledger, signed in identical ink, and a church bell that rang for 37 years after no one remained to hear it. This is not a ghost story. It is a bureaucratic one. What you are about to hear was never meant to be remembered. The town was called Bellemere, a name removed from maps before the century turned. It sat between two rivers that no longer share their original names, surrounded by forests planted by hands that would later deny having touched the soil at all. Bellemere was not erased by fire or flood. It was erased by agreement. Every man, every woman, every child above the age of 7. They signed the same oath. And then they vanished. The earliest known reference to Bellemere appears in an 1834 railroad survey, a footnote describing an unusually cooperative settlement, administratively self-contained. That phrase would later be crossed out in red ink. Bellemere had no mayor, no jail, no public cemetery. Instead, it had 3 structures larger than any private home: a stone church with no recorded denomination, an orphanage that accepted children without names, and a records hall with no windows. Visitors described the town as quiet, but not peaceful. Horses refused to drink from the river. Dogs reportedly fled the forest edge at dusk. Travelers complained of headaches, disorientation, and the recurring sense that they were being watched by something that did not blink. Census data from 1850 lists 412 residents. The next census lists 0. No deaths recorded. No migration noted. No disaster declared. Just absence. Even more disturbing, the surrounding towns reported no missing persons. It was as if Bellemere had never contained people at all. The Bellemere Orphan House opened in 1841. Officially, it served displaced youth from regional hardships. Unofficially, no child there had a birth record. Not one. Church correspondence from neighboring counties refers to the orphanage as a transfer point, but never specifies from where. Children arrived at night, often in groups of 5 or 6, escorted by men whose names never appear in payrolls. Former supply clerks, interviewed decades later, described something unsettling. The children did not cry. They did not ask questions. And when spoken to, they often responded with the same phrase: "I was told not to remember before I came." Staff turnover was extreme. Caretakers left within weeks, citing insomnia, intrusive dreams, and the feeling that the children were older than their faces. One nurse wrote in her resignation letter, "They look at you like they're waiting for you to forget them." The letter ends mid-sentence. Bellemere's church held services every Sunday, but sermons were never recorded. No hymns are listed. No scripture cited. Only attendance. Witness accounts describe congregants sitting in perfect stillness, eyes open, breathing synchronized, while the pastor read from a leather-bound book that was never seen outside the pulpit. Former travelers reported one recurring phrase spoken by the congregation in unison: "Memory is the wound. Forgetting is the cure." The bell tower contained 3 bells. Only one was ever rung. The other 2 were sealed inside the stone, never sounded, never explained. And beneath the church, according to architectural plans later classified, was a chamber not large enough for a congregation, but far too large for a cellar. The oath was not discovered in Bellemere. It was found 40 years later, misfiled inside a federal land dispute case in another state, folded once, never referenced, never explained. No title, no seal, no author. Just 16 paragraphs written in precise, identical handwriting, as if copied, not composed. Every name at the bottom was different. Every signature above it was exactly the same. The oath did not swear loyalty. It did not promise obedience. It demanded absence. "I consent to the removal of what was placed within me before language. I will not seek what returns in dreams. I release the child, the witness, and the inheritance of remembering." The final line was underlined twice. This forgetting is not an end. It is a containment. Margins showed pressure marks, indentations from previous pages, suggesting the oath had been signed repeatedly, hundreds of times, always with the same words, always with the same pen. But here is the detail that unsettled archivists most. The paper was older than the ink. In 1931, A junior federal auditor named Elias Crowell was assigned to reconcile irregular land deeds connected to a non-existent settlement. Crowell read the oath once. Just once. He wrote in his personal journal that night, "It feels like something is pressing against the inside of my thoughts. Not pain. Pressure. As if a door has been sealed from the wrong side." Within weeks, Crowell began experiencing episodes of derealization. He failed to recognize streets he had walked for years. He stopped responding to his wife's name, though he insisted he still loved her. Doctors diagnosed exhaustion, then amnesia, then nothing. Crowell was found wandering near the original site of Bellemere, standing barefoot in the snow, staring at a forest that should not have been there. When questioned, he repeated a single sentence. "They kept it here because it grows quieter when everyone agrees not to look at it." Crowell died in a state hospital 5 months later. His journal was confiscated. One page was removed. Bellemere's records hall was the last structure to be demolished. Workers complained of vertigo, nausea, and sudden emotional breakdowns during excavation. One man reportedly wept for hours without knowing why. Inside, shelves were found stacked with ledgers. None contained births. None contained deaths. They contained erasures. Whole pages blacked out. Not violently, but carefully. Ink layered until words became texture rather than language. Some pages were left blank except for dates. Dates that corresponded to nothing else. But beneath the floorboards, investigators found something worse. A secondary archive. Thin notebooks bound in cloth, each labeled with a single number. Inside were observations, not of events, but of mental states. Subject 14 reports dreams of fire beneath water. Subject 22 refuses mirrors. Subject 31 remembers something that does not belong to them. There were exactly 412 notebooks, the same number as Bellemere's last recorded population. Bellemere did not wake up one day and decide to forget. It practiced. Church attendance records show weekly silent sessions. Orphanage logs describe memory fasting. Families recorded periods where children were not spoken to, sometimes for weeks. This was not neglect. It was training. Residents believed memory was not passive, that it leaked, that it could spread, that remembering the wrong thing could reopen something sealed long before the town existed. They believed forgetting required collective participation, and that if even one person remembered too much, the town would fail. A final note found in the church basement, carved into stone rather than written, reads, "We were not chosen because we were strong. We were chosen because we were willing." The chamber was not marked on any public blueprint. It was discovered only after demolition crews struck a hollow space beneath the church foundation, one that swallowed sound instead of echoing it. The descent was narrow. Stone steps worn smooth by use, not age. At the bottom was a circular room with walls carved in symbols that did not belong to any known language. They were not decorative. They were repetitive, like instructions written again and again to ensure compliance. There were no pews. No altar. Only a depression in the floor, wide enough for several people to stand inside, or for something to be placed there. Air samples taken later revealed something impossible. Oxygen levels were normal, but testers reported dizziness, emotional distress, and intrusive childhood memories within minutes. One investigator wrote, "It feels like the room is remembering for you." At the center of the chamber, set flush into stone, was a metal ring, burnished by hands that had grasped it often. And around it, etched into the floor, a sentence repeated 12 times. "What is named is invited." Bellemere did not worship here. It contained. Records from the orphanage indicate scheduled night transfers to the church basement. Children between the ages of 6 and 9. Always in silence. Always barefoot. No records describe what happened in the chamber. But the notebooks beneath the records hall change tone after each transfer date. Language becomes fragmented. Observations grow fearful. Subject 7 no longer dreams, but wakes screaming. Subject 19 insists the dark has a shape. Subject 31 says the room beneath the church knows their name. One entry appears again and again, written by different hands. The children see it more clearly. That is why they must forget first. Former residents, interviewed decades later under hypnosis, recalled standing in the chamber, feeling pressure behind their eyes, and being told to look away inwardly, to close something without seeing it, to witness without remembering. This was not protection. It was exposure, followed by erasure. Bellemeyer's central belief was simple. Some things are drawn to being remembered, not ghosts, not demons, something older, something that does not exist fully unless it is observed, named, passed down. The town believed this presence had attached itself to the region long before settlement, that early pioneers encountered it accidentally, mistaking it for religious revelation or madness. Bellemeyer was created as a solution, a controlled environment where forgetting could be practiced, refined, perfected. Children were key, not because they were weak, but because they remembered differently. Their memories were unstructured, vivid, dangerous. If a child carried the memory too long, it would stabilize. And once stabilized, it could not be removed. That is why no child in Bellemeyer had a surname. That is why family history stopped at birth. That is why lullabies were forbidden. Memory was treated like fire. Useful, deadly, never to be carried alone. Something went wrong in 1891. The notebooks stop abruptly. Church attendance spikes to daily sessions. Children are transferred every night for 3 weeks straight. One final entry, written shakily, reads, "It is no longer waiting for us to remember. It is remembering us." Witnesses in nearby towns reported strange phenomena that winter. Bells ringing without churches. Children speaking in unfamiliar voices. Adults waking with names on their tongues they could not place. Bellemeyer responded with a final solution. A unanimous oath. Total forgetting. Not just of the presence, but of themselves. The meeting was held inside the church. Not beneath it. Not near the chamber. Above it. As far from what waited below as stone would allow. Candles were lit, but not for light. Bellemeyer residents had learned that flames steadied the mind. It gave the illusion of control. No one argued. No one cried. The decision had already been made in silence weeks earlier. What remained was procedure. The oath was read aloud, slowly, carefully, by a man whose voice did not tremble. Each paragraph was followed by a pause, allowing the words to settle, to sink past resistance. Parents stood beside children. Husbands beside wives. No one held hands. That was intentional. The final paragraph required repetition. Every resident spoke it together, a single voice made from hundreds. I relinquish the witness I have been. I accept the mercy of absence. Let what remains be unremembered. One by one, they stepped forward and signed. The pen never changed. The ink never ran dry. And when the last name was written, something shifted. Not audibly, not visibly, but internally. Several witnesses later described the sensation as relief. Others as grief without an object. The obvious question is this: why didn't anyone flee? The answer is buried in Bellemeyer's conditioning. By the time the oath was proposed, leaving was already impossible, not physically, but cognitively. Residents had spent decades practicing selective forgetting. Their sense of identity was communal, not individual. To leave would have required remembering alone. And remembering alone was believed to be fatal. Children had been taught that memory outside the group was dangerous. Adults believed separation would destabilize whatever was contained beneath the church. They did not fear death. They feared release. One note found later, written by a mother on the back of a hymn sheet, reads, "If I run, it will follow. If I stay, it sleeps." Bellemeyer chose sleep, even if it meant never waking. At midnight, the church bell rang once. No rope was pulled. No mechanism engaged. It was not the bell normally used for services. It was the second bell, the one sealed inside the tower for decades. Nearby towns reported hearing it faintly, as if underwater. Animals reacted violently. Birds took flight in the dark. And then, silence. The next morning, a farmer from a neighboring county passed through Bellemeyer on his way to market. He later testified that the town looked unfinished. Doors stood open. Tables were set. Beds were warm. But no one was there. No signs of struggle. No signs of haste. Just the overwhelming sense that something had been deliberately removed. Not stolen. Not destroyed. Removed. Authorities were notified. Reports were filed. And then, quietly, closed. Bellemeyer's land deeds were reassigned. Its name was struck from maps. Railroad lines were rerouted. School districts dissolved. No investigation was completed, because there were no victims, no survivors, no memory. Surrounding towns adjusted with unsettling ease. Birth records no longer listed Bellemeyer as a place of origin. Former trade routes vanished from ledgers. People forgot neighbors they had known for decades. It was not forced. It was contagious. Forgetting, it seemed, spread best when it felt like relief. Within a year, Bellemere became a blank space no one questioned. Exactly as intended. The second bell rang again in 1902. No one was living in Bellemere by then. The tower had partially collapsed. The rope had rotted away. Wind alone could not have reached it. And yet, on a fog-heavy morning, farmers miles away heard a single, low toll. Just once. Over the next 37 years, the bell rang sporadically. Always once. Always without warning. Always during moments of widespread social stress, economic crashes, epidemics, wars. Never on holidays. Never during celebrations. Those who heard it described the same sensation. A sudden, intrusive thought that did not belong to them. A name they couldn't place. A childhood image that felt borrowed. A fleeting certainty that something had almost been remembered. By 1939, the bell tower was dismantled entirely. The bell itself was never recovered. Official records state it was lost during removal. Unofficial correspondence suggests no one was willing to transport it. One worker reportedly said, "It feels like it knows when you're thinking about it." Today, Bellemere's location is a forest clearing with no markers, no plaques, no ruins above ground. But visitors report anomalies. GPS devices fail. Compasses drift. Audio recordings lose fragments of speech. Entire sentences gone, as if never spoken. People describe emotional responses without cause: grief, nostalgia, relief. Some leave with the sense that they forgot something important on the way home, but cannot identify what. Archaeological surveys have repeatedly been abandoned. Not because nothing is found, but because teams cannot agree on what they uncovered. Field notes contradict one another. Measurements shift between drafts. Photographs fail to match written descriptions. One researcher summarized the problem simply: the site does not resist excavation. It resists agreement. There is no evidence that Bellemere destroyed what it feared, only that it changed its relationship to it. The oath did not banish. It did not seal permanently. It starved. By removing witnesses, by erasing memory at scale, the town deprived the presence of the one thing it required to stabilize itself: continuity. But starvation is not the same as death. And forgetting is not permanent, especially when someone listens too closely, especially when a story is told again. Bellemere's final success was not disappearing. It was convincing the world that disappearance could be reasonable, that forgetting could be mercy, that some truths are safer when no one carries them. But the bell rang after the town was gone. The forest still unsettles those who linger. And the oath still exists, misfiled, and signed by the present, waiting to be read again. Because memory is not just personal, it is structural, and when enough people agree not to remember something, it does not vanish. It waits. If this story disturbed you, that may not be fear. It may be recognition.